Hey guys, I thought I would go ahead and hit you up with a topic video since I haven't really done one in a while that hasn't also been a rant. This is something that's been brewing in the back of my mind for a little while now, and I thought I would make a video of it. As the title of this video asks, I want to know, do people actually want television shows to jump the shark? If you don't know what this phrase means, let me quickly clarify. The phrase comes from a moment in the television series Happy Days, when the character of Fonzie, who started off as an aloof loner, became so awesome and super powerful that he was literally able to jump over a shark in a convoluted motorcycle stunt. Now, the phrase refers to that one defining moment when a show takes things too far. As far as I'm concerned, if a show is canceled 1 or 2 seasons in, then they are less likely, nay, almost certain, to not cross the point where they will jump the shark. And if a show goes on for 4 or 5 or 10 seasons, then it is most likely and even very probable that it will jump the shark at some point. There's a good reason shows jump the shark. If you are a writer, you know this, and if you're not, then it's important to know that it is not necessarily easy to come up with ideas all of the time. If you are writing for a television show that's been going strong for several seasons, then you have to try and come up with ideas that don't feel like something the show has already done. And also, if you have a show that's been going for several seasons, then it's very likely, almost certain, that the show has a very devoted fan base. Otherwise, the show wouldn't have had the support to keep it going. So, if you're writing for a show that has a devoted fan base, you might feel even more pressure to produce something that's absolutely top-notch and won't disappoint the fans. So it's understandable that writers might fall into the trap of trying to escalate things so that they are bigger and better than they were before. And thus, something happens where Fonzie jumps over a shark in a motorcycle stunt. If Happy Days was a comedy show about the family dynamics of the Cunninghams and Richie's friends, then the show Jumping the Shark with Fonzie, jumping the shark, that's, what happens. This is something so utterly ridiculous that you would never have thought that it would happen in the show when you first started watching it in the first season. Now, Happy Days is not actually a show I will be discussing here any more than I already have. First, let me talk a little bit about the television show Cheers. Cheers is a good example of the writers not even really being at fault for the show jumping the shark, although in a way they are. Cheers was a sitcom about a guy named Sam who owned a bar named Cheers. In the first episode, he meets a woman named Diane who begins working for Sam when her husband leaves her for his former lover. The show is basically the comedic relationships between the co-workers in the bar, with the ongoing will they won't they aspect of Sam and Diane's relationship. They start off as just a boss and his employee who don't necessarily like each other that much. And then shortly into the series, they became friendlier toward each other, and then romantic feelings began to kick in on both sides. Now, I would say part of the problem with Cheers, at least the reason I stopped watching the show after about 8 episodes, was that both Sam and Diane clearly had a thing for each other, and they both pretended like they didn't. And furthermore, they both knew that the other had a thing for each other. And this was less than halfway into the first season. I guarantee that if the creators of this show knew they were going to last 11 years, they would have let this relationship happen at a slower and more organic pace. Now, actress Shelley Long, who played the character of Diane, she left the show after the completion of season 5. According to her, this was because she felt that if she had stayed on, the show would get stale, and also she wanted to spend time with her young daughter. Nothing wrong with that. But the problem came when the people behind this show wanted to keep going, and did keep going for another 6 years. The whole show was, as far as I can tell, about the crux of Sam and Diane's relationship. When you remove her from the show, what exactly do you have? As far as I'm concerned, and I say this as someone who only saw a handful of episodes and never beyond season 1, this show should not have kept going when Diane left. That was when the shark was jumped. After this, they replaced her with actress Kirstie Alley. But no respect against Alley, but that's not the same, is it? I say this is sort of the fault of the writers because they had the chance to end it when Shelley Long did, but instead they kept going and the show wasn't the same afterwards. You might say that it is unfair of me to want them to cancel the show and end the jobs of everyone working on that show because one actress wanted to leave. But I would submit to you that the alternative is sitting back and letting the show keep going and watching it sink deeper and deeper into suck. I'm not necessarily saying that season 10, let's say, of Cheers really sucked, but it's a show that didn't quite resemble season 1 in any way, did it? For people who watch modern television shows that are a little closer to today, something almost identical happened and is still happening with the show 2.5 Men. Now, I never watched this show, but the premise seems simple enough. Two brothers. One seemingly quite wealthy from songs he writes, and the other a divorced father of his young son. The father and son come to live with the uncle, and hilarity ensues. And I probably don't have to remind anybody that Charlie Sheen, the actor who played the uncle, had a little bit of a psychotic meltdown a few years ago. This involved the show because Sheen was yelling about the director was worthless or something. I actually tried to ignore the shenanigans when they were happening because I didn't find them to be very amusing like everyone else. But long story short, Sheen was fired and left the show. And so in the very next episode that had not been filmed, we are told that his character died in a car crash. At least that's the story I heard. But the show is called 2.5 Men. What to do? Well, naturally, we replaced Charlie Sheen with Ashton Kutcher, who is, I guess, somehow living with the father and son? Like I say, you probably couldn't pay me to watch this show, so I won't profess to know what the new status quo of the series is. But the people who did watch the show grew attached to the character, and to replace him with an entirely new guy turns the series into something else entirely than what it was before, right? This is very similar to Cheers. And now it seems like the kid, who is not so young anymore, is planning on leaving the show and only coming back for guest appearances. I think it's safe to say the shark has been jumped here. At which point will this show just stop because it no longer even a little bit resembles the show that it started out as? This is something to keep in mind for any series. What does this have to do with the title of this video? What makes me think that people want shows to jump the shark? That comes from shows that end very early on. Firefly, Dollhouse, Terminator, The Sarah Connor Chronicles, Journeyman, The Class, Pushing Daisies. These shows got canceled very early on, only lasting a season or two each. And you know what people say about those shows? Why couldn't that show have lasted longer? Why is the network evil? Why does show X last 8 years, but my show gets canceled after one season? Why? And to a degree, I can sympathize. After all, of all the shows that I just listed, I really liked 3 of them. And on some level, I can understand the desire to see more of something if it is really good. I actually still hear this to this day about Firefly. I submit to you that although I won't get to see the development of the relationship between Simon and Kaylee, or if Yosafbridge was going to eventually join the crew, or if Jane would somehow soften like Spike and Cordelia did in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, or if the Blue Hands group had an entire school of deadly telepathic assassins and that River is just a rookie compared to them. Even though I won't be able to see those things, which would be really cool, what I also won't have to see is the show sucking. To keep this in the Joss Whedon wheelhouse, Buffy the Vampire Slayer started off pretty great, I thought, but season 4, basically to the end of the series, really wasn't anything to write home about for many reasons. Angel was more consistently good, but I wasn't a huge fan of season 3, at least not in the same way that I was the previous 2 seasons, and everyone pretty much universally agrees that season 4 was a steaming pile. In a way, Firefly was put out of its misery before it went septic and everyone started talking about, why is this show still going? We were spared the bad stuff like Mal and River in a relationship, or Jane taking over as captain, or finding out that there really were aliens in the verse after all. And this basically translates to what I was saying about fans wanting their shows to jump the shark. Or to put it more simply, fans would rather see a show that they like or even love last a long time and become awful than end it before it got bad. I do think more cool things with Firefly could have been done, but I also think some things with Firefly would have eventually been bad. Because even someone like Joss Whedon, who everyone likes to worship, isn't infallible. He would have eventually hit a creative slump and started putting out crap if the show had not been canceled, much like what happened with Buffy and Angel. I say we are better off this way. So next time a show you are watching is ending, before you start complaining that the show ended too soon, remember that if you had your way, the show would likely have slid into the land of awful television, like so many other shows that do keep going. That's about all I have to say. I'm curious what you think about this, so if you agree or disagree, let me know in the comments below or make a video response. I hope this video found you well, and I hope you have a good rest of the day.